Jake Morrison stood in the corner of the grand hall trying to make himself invisible. This was his first diplomatic event, and he was already regretting everything. The room was filled with aliens of all shapes and sizes, and Jake felt completely out of place in his crisp uniform. He was just a communications officer on the horizon's edge, a human ship that had been stationed at this outpost for 3 months. Humans were new to space, new to meeting aliens, and definitely new to fancy diplomatic parties. Most of the other species looked at humans like they were fragile little creatures who might break at any moment. Jake grabbed a drink from a passing server and took a sip. It tasted awful. He made a face and put the glass down quickly. Alien food and drinks were still something he was getting used to. "You look lost, Lieutenant," said a voice beside him. It was Amy Chen, another officer from his ship. She was smiling at him in that way that meant she was about to say something that would make him uncomfortable. "I'm fine," Jake said. "Just observing." "You mean hiding," Amy corrected. "Come on, you're supposed to be mingling." "That's why they sent us here, to make friends with the locals." "I'm not good at mingling," Jake protested. "You know that." Amy laughed and nudged him forward. "Well, you better learn fast. Captain's orders. Go talk to someone." Before Jake could argue, Amy had disappeared into the crowd, leaving him alone again. He sighed and looked around the room. Most of the aliens were busy talking to each other in groups. They didn't seem interested in talking to the humans. Then he saw her. She stood near the center of the room, towering over everyone else. She had to be at least 7 feet tall, with broad shoulders and arms that looked like they could bend steel. Her skin was a pale blue color, and her eyes were a striking silver. But what really caught Jake's attention was her hair. It was long and dark, braided in an incredibly complex pattern that wrapped around her head like a crown. Small metal beads were woven into the braids, and they caught the light when she moved. Jake had never seen anything like it. It must have taken hours to create. Without thinking, Jake found himself walking toward her. His brain was screaming at him to stop, to turn around, to go back to his corner, but his feet kept moving forward. The woman was talking to a group of shorter aliens who seemed very nervous in her presence. As Jake got closer, he could hear their conversation. They were discussing trade routes and security patrols. Very boring diplomatic stuff. Jake waited for a break in the conversation. The woman glanced at him, and her silver eyes locked onto his. For a moment, Jake forgot how to breathe. She was intimidating in a way he had never experienced before. "Yes?" she said. Her voice was deep and strong, with an accent that Jake couldn't place. This was it. Jake should say something smart, something diplomatic, something that would make humans look good. Instead, what came out of his mouth was, "That's really nice hair." The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just been dropped. The entire hall went silent. Every alien in the room turned to stare at Jake and the tall woman. Even the music stopped playing. The woman's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. The aliens who had been talking to her quickly backed away, their faces showing something that looked like fear. Jake realized he had made a terrible mistake. I mean, it looks like it took a lot of work," he stammered. "The braids are really intricate." "It's impressive." "That's all I meant." The woman continued to stare at him. Her expression was completely unreadable. Jake wanted to melt into the floor and disappear forever. Finally, after what felt like an hour but was probably only 10 seconds, the woman spoke. "You compliment my battle braids?" Yes," Jake said. He had no idea what battle braids were, but he was pretty sure he had just insulted her somehow. "You dare to speak of my honor marks as if you have the right?" Her voice was getting louder now. "As if you know what they mean?" "I'm sorry," Jake said quickly. "I didn't mean to offend you. I'm human. We're new here. I don't know all the customs yet. I just thought your hair looked nice. That's all." The woman took a step toward him. Jake had to tilt his head back to keep looking at her face. He was suddenly very aware of how much bigger and stronger she was than him. "I am Commander Lyra Vex of the Krithari Empire," she announced loudly, so everyone in the room could hear. "You have commented on my battle braids. In my culture, this is not a casual observation. It is a declaration of intent." "Intent?" Jake squeaked. "What kind of intent?" "Romantic intent," Lyra said flatly. "You have declared yourself as a potential mate." Jake felt all the blood drain from his face. "What, no? I just said your hair was nice. I didn't declare anything. Among my people, to compliment a warrior's braids is to express serious interest in bonding. Lyra continued. It is not done lightly. It is not done by strangers. And it is certainly not done by— She looked him up and down. Small, weak creatures from unknown worlds. Jake heard several gasps from around the room. He was pretty sure Lyra had just insulted him, but he was too panicked to care. I'm really sorry, Jake said again. It was a misunderstanding. I'll just go now and we can forget this ever happened. No, Lyra said firmly. You have made your declaration in front of witnesses. You cannot simply walk away. That would be an insult to my honor. And insulting a Crithari warrior has consequences. Jake's heart was pounding in his chest. This was going from bad to worse. What kind of consequences? Lyra crossed her arms over her chest. You have two choices, human. Either you prove your words were sincere by completing the traditional courtship trials and bonding with me in marriage, or you admit publicly that you spoke falsely and bear the shame of being a liar who toys with a warrior's honor. Marriage? Jake's voice came out as a high-pitched squeak. We just met. I don't even know you. That is what the courtship trials are for, Lyra said. To determine if you are worthy. Jake looked around desperately for help. He spotted Amy in the crowd. She was staring at him with her mouth hanging open, clearly as shocked as he was. Near the doorway he saw Captain Williams, his commanding officer, looking extremely worried. There has to be another option, Jake pleaded. There is not, Lyra said. You have made your choice when you spoke. Now you must face the consequences. Captain Williams pushed through the crowd and reached Jake's side. Commander Vex, surely we can discuss this. Lieutenant Morrison is new to Galactic Customs. He meant no disrespect. Disrespect or not, the words were spoken, Lyra said. If he refuses to honor them, it will be seen as an insult not just to me but to all Crithari. Is that what humanity wants? To insult one of the most powerful warrior races in the galaxy? Captain Williams's jaw tightened. Jake could see him running calculations in his head. Humanity was still establishing its place in the galactic community. They couldn't afford to make enemies, especially not powerful ones. How long do these courtship trials last? The captain asked carefully. As long as they need to, Lyra replied. Some couples complete them in weeks. Others take months. It depends on the individuals involved. The captain looked at Jake with an expression that was both apologetic and firm. Lieutenant Morrison, it seems you've gotten yourself into a diplomatic situation. Sir, you can't be serious, Jake said. You can't actually expect me to marry an alien warrior because I complimented her hair. I expect you to do what's necessary for good relations between our species, the captain said quietly. At least for now. We'll figure something out, but for the moment you need to agree to the trials. Jake looked back at Lyra. She was watching him with those intense silver eyes, waiting for his answer. He thought about refusing, about causing an interstellar incident, about ruining everything humanity had worked for in space. He took a deep breath. Fine, I'll do the courtship trials. A murmur went through the crowd. Lyra's expression didn't change, but Jake thought he saw something flicker in her eyes. Surprise, respect? He couldn't tell. Very well, Lyra said. The trials begin tomorrow at dawn. Do not be late, human. I do not tolerate weakness or tardiness. She turned and walked away, the crowd parting before her like water. Jake stood there, feeling like he had just been hit by a truck. Amy appeared at his side. Jake, did you just agree to marry an alien warrior? I think so, Jake said numbly. Amy, what have I done? You complimented her hair, Amy said, and despite everything, she started to laugh. You literally complimented her hair and now you're engaged. Jake groaned and covered his face with his hands. This was going to be a disaster. An absolute, complete disaster. Jake didn't sleep at all that night. He spent hours reading everything he could find about the Crithari and their culture. Most of it was not encouraging. The Crithari were a warrior race that valued strength above everything else. They had been fighting wars and conquering planets for thousands of years. Their society was built around honor, combat, and proving yourself worthy through trials and challenges. They thought most other species were weak and soft. The courtship trials, according to what Jake could find, were designed to test if a potential mate was strong enough, smart enough, and brave enough to stand beside a Crithari warrior. Most of the trials involved physical challenges that would be difficult even for other Crithari. For a human, they seemed impossible. You're going to get yourself killed, Amy said. She'd come to his quarters to check on him, and found him surrounded by data tablets and looking increasingly pale. Probably, Jake agreed. Do you think the captain would let me fake my death and hide on a transport ship back to Earth? No, Amy said firmly. But maybe you don't have to complete all the trials. Maybe you just have to try hard enough that Lyra releases you from the obligation without losing face. Jake looked up at her hopefully. You think that could work? I don't know, Amy admitted. But it's better than nothing. Just don't die on the first day, okay? When dawn came, Jake put on his uniform and made his way to the training grounds where Lyra had told him to meet her. His stomach was churning with nerves. The training grounds were outside the main outpost in an open area surrounded by strange alien trees. Lyra was already there, wearing what looked like combat armor. Several other Krithari warriors stood nearby, watching with interest. You are late, Lyra said as Jake approached. Jake checked his watch. I'm exactly on time. A true warrior arrives early, Lyra said. But I suppose I should not expect too much from a human. Come, we begin with the first trial. She led him to a large obstacle course that looked like it had been designed by someone who hated people. There were walls to climb, pits to jump over, and various pieces of equipment that Jake didn't recognize but that looked painful. This is the trial of endurance, Lyra explained. You must complete the course before the sun reaches its peak. If you fail, the courtship ends. Jake looked at the course, then at the sun, then back at the course. He had maybe 3 hours. The course looked like it would take him 6. Okay, he said, because there was nothing else to say. Begin, Lyra commanded. Jake started running. The first obstacle was a wall about 12 feet high. For Lyra and the other Krithari, this would be easy. They could probably just jump and grab the top. For Jake, it was a problem. He looked around and spotted some crates stacked nearby. He dragged one over to the wall, climbed on top of it, and used the extra height to reach the top of the wall. He pulled himself up and dropped down the other side. Behind him, he heard one of the Krithari warriors laugh. He uses tools like a child, the warrior said in a voice loud enough for Jake to hear. He uses his brain, another voice said. Jake was surprised to realize it was Lyra. That is not weakness. Jake kept moving. The next obstacle was a series of bars suspended over a muddy pit. He had to swing from one to the next to get across. His arms were already tired from climbing the wall, but he gritted his teeth and jumped for the first bar. His hand slipped almost immediately. He fell into the mud with a loud splash. The watching Krithari warriors laughed again. Jake wiped mud from his eyes and climbed out of the pit. There had to be a better way. He looked at the bars more carefully and noticed they were connected by chains. If he could swing the bars, he might be able to get enough momentum to reach the other side without having to swing from each one individually. He grabbed the first bar and pushed it hard, setting it swinging. Then he jumped and grabbed it as it swung back toward him. The momentum carried him forward, and he let go at the right moment to grab the next bar. It worked. He made it across the pit on his second try. Clever, Lyra said quietly. The trial continued. Jake fell, got back up, and kept going. He used his smaller size to fit through spaces the Krithari couldn't. He used physics and momentum instead of pure strength. He used every trick he could think of. By the time he reached the final obstacle, the sun was almost at its peak. He had maybe 10 minutes left. The last obstacle was a rope climb up a tall tower. Jake's arms felt like they were made of wet noodles, and his hands were covered in blisters. He grabbed the rope and started climbing. Every pull sent pain through his arms and shoulders. Halfway up, his strength gave out. He hung there, unable to go up or down. You cannot do it, one of the Krithari warriors called out. Give up, human. Jake wanted to give up. Every part of his body was screaming at him to let go and fall, but something stubborn inside him refused. He wrapped his legs around the rope in a different way, using them to take some of the weight off his arms. Then he started climbing again, slower this time, but steady. His vision was going gray at the edges, and his breath was coming in gasps. With one final desperate pull, he reached the top of the tower, just as the sun reached its peak. He collapsed on the platform, unable to move. He heard footsteps on the stairs inside the tower. Lyra emerged onto the platform and looked down at him. Jake couldn't read her expression. "You completed the trial," she said. "Barely," Jake gasped. "Barely is still completion," Lyra said. She held out her hand. Jake stared at it for a moment, then reached up and let her pull him to his feet. Her grip was incredibly strong but surprisingly gentle. "You are weaker than any warrior I have known," Lyra said. "But you do not give up. That is unexpected." "Thanks," Jake said. He wasn't sure if that was a compliment or an insult. "Come, you need medical attention for your hands," Lyra said. She led him down the stairs and toward a medical building. The doctor who treated Jake's blistered hands was a Krithari female named Kara. She seemed amused by the whole situation. "So you are the human who complimented Commander Vex's braids," Kara said as she wrapped bandages around Jake's palms. "The whole outpost is talking about it." "Great," Jake muttered. "Most of us thought she would reject you immediately," Kara continued. "Commander Vex has refused every suitor for years. Her family is not pleased. They think she brings shame by remaining unbonded." Jake looked up at her in surprise. "She's refused other suitors?" "Many," Kara said. "Powerful warriors from important families. She said none of them were worthy." She finished the bandages and stepped back. "So either you are very special, or she has another reason for accepting your challenge." That thought bothered Jake for the rest of the day. What if Lyra was just using him for some political reason? What if this was all some kind of game he didn't understand? That evening, there was a knock on his door. When Jake opened it, Lyra stood there. She was no longer wearing her armor. Instead, she wore a simple dark tunic and pants. She looked less intimidating, but still incredibly imposing. "May I enter?" she asked. Jake was so surprised that he just nodded and stepped aside. Lyra walked in and looked around his small quarters with interest. "I came to discuss the next trial," Lyra said. "It will take place in 3 days. That will give your hands time to heal." "Thank you," Jake said. He gestured to the only chair in the room. "Do you want to sit?" Lyra sat, though the chair looked too small for her. There was an awkward silence. "Why are you really doing this?" Jake asked finally. "The doctor told me you've refused lots of other suitors. Why accept my challenge?" Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "Because you saw my braids," she said finally. "Not my rank, not my reputation, not my family name. You saw something I created and appreciated it for what it was. No one has done that in a very long time." Jake sat down on his bed across from her. "I really did just think they looked nice. I didn't know what it meant in your culture." "I know," Lyra said. "That is why I gave you the challenge. I expected you to refuse. Most would. But you accepted." "Why?" "Because my captain told me it was important for diplomatic relations," Jake said honestly, "and because running away seemed cowardly." To his surprise, Lyra smiled. It was small and quick, but it was definitely a smile. "At least you are honest." "So what happens now?" Jake asked. "I completed the first trial. How many more are there?" "That depends," Lyra said. "The trials continue until either you fail or I declare you worthy or we both agree to end the courtship. There is no set number." "What if I keep passing the trials?" Jake asked. "Then eventually we would be bonded in marriage," Lyra said simply. "But I would not worry about that. The trials become much harder." "Great," Jake said. "That's very reassuring." Lyra stood up to leave. "Rest and heal, Jake Morrison. You will need your strength." It was the first time she had used his first name. Something about that felt significant, though Jake couldn't say why. After she left, Jake lay back on his bed and stared at the ceiling. This whole situation was insane. He was going through courtship trials with an alien warrior who could probably break him in half without trying. And the strangest part? He was starting to like her. The second trial came 3 days later, just as Lyra had promised. This time, Jake arrived early. He found Lyra waiting at a different training ground, this one featuring a large arena filled with various weapons mounted on the walls. Today is the trial of strategy, Lyra announced. You will face me in combat. Jake's heart sank. Combat, you're going to fight me. Not to the death, Lyra clarified. First to land 3 strikes wins. You may choose any weapon from the wall. I will use my bare hands to make it fair. Jake looked at the weapons. There were swords, spears, staffs, and things he didn't even have names for. None of them felt right in his hands when he tested them. He was trained in basic self-defense, not ancient weapons. Then he saw something that made him pause. It was a simple wooden staff about 6 feet long. He had taken some martial arts classes back on Earth that used similar weapons. It wasn't much, but it was better than nothing. He picked up the staff. Okay, I'm ready. Lyra stepped into the arena. Several other Krithari warriors had gathered to watch, including a large male warrior who Jake hadn't seen before. This warrior was watching with particular interest, and something about his expression made Jake nervous. Begin, Lyra said. Jake didn't attack immediately. He circled Lyra slowly, watching how she moved. She was incredibly fast for someone so large, and her balance was perfect. A direct attack would fail instantly. Lyra grew impatient and lunged forward. Jake barely managed to dodge, using the staff to help him roll sideways. He came up and swung the staff at her legs, but she jumped over it effortlessly and tagged his shoulder with her hand. 1 strike, she announced. Jake reset his position. He needed to think differently. Lyra was stronger, faster, and had far more combat experience. But she was also bigger, which meant she had a larger target area and possibly slower reactions at close range. The next time Lyra attacked, Jake didn't try to dodge away. Instead, he stepped into her attack, inside her reach where her long arms couldn't get full power. He jabbed the end of the staff into her side before she could adjust. 1 strike, Jake said. Lyra looked surprised. You fight like a coward getting so close. I fight like someone who's going to lose if I play by your rules, Jake replied. So I'm playing by mine. The watching Krithari warriors murmured among themselves. The large male warrior looked angry. The fight continued. Lyra scored her 2nd strike when she caught Jake with a kick he didn't see coming. Jake scored his 2nd strike by feinting high and then sweeping Lyra's legs with the staff, though she recovered so quickly that he barely had time to tap her before she was back on her feet. They were tied at 2 strikes each. Both of them were breathing hard now. Jake's arms ached, and he knew he couldn't keep this up much longer. He needed to end this soon. Lyra came at him with a series of fast strikes. Jake blocked as many as he could with the staff, but he knew he was being driven backward toward the arena wall. Once he was trapped, it would be over, unless that was exactly what he wanted. Jake let himself be pushed back until he was almost against the wall. Then, at the last second, he dropped the staff and dove between Lyra's legs, rolling through and coming up behind her. He tapped her back before she could turn around. 3 strikes, Jake gasped. I win. The arena went completely silent. Jake could see the shock on Lyra's face as she turned to face him. The watching warriors looked like they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Then the large male warrior Jake had noticed earlier stepped forward. This is a mockery, he snarled. Commander Vex, you shame yourself by allowing this creature to touch you, to defeat you. He does not fight with honor. Lyra's expression went cold. Commander Dax Vorn, you will not speak to me of honor. Your honor is already lost by entertaining this farce, Dax continued. This human is weak. He uses tricks and deception instead of true strength. He is not worthy of any Krithari warrior, least of all you. He is worthy of what I say he is worthy of, Lyra snapped, and he won the trial fairly within the rules I established. Or do you question my judgment, Dax? Dax's face twisted with anger. I question why you would lower yourself to this when you refused my bond request. Am I not a decorated commander? Do I not come from a noble family? What does this human have that I do not? Jake suddenly understood. This wasn't just about him. Dax was one of the suitors Lyra had rejected, and seeing her accept Jake's challenge had wounded his pride. He has something you will never have, Lyra said quietly. He has the courage to be himself instead of trying to prove how strong he is every moment of every day. Dax looked like he wanted to say more, but Lyra's expression made it clear the conversation was over. He turned and stormed out of the arena, several other warriors following him. After everyone else had left, Lyra approached Jake. You fought well, she said. Better than I expected. I got lucky, Jake admitted. Luck is also a skill, Lyra said. Come. There is something I want to show you. She led him away from the training grounds, through the outpost, and out into the alien forest that surrounded the base. Jake followed, curious about where they were going. After about 20 minutes of walking, they emerged into a clearing. A small stream ran through it, and the alien trees provided shade from the bright sun. It was peaceful and quiet. Lyra sat down on a large rock near the stream. Jake sat beside her, leaving a respectful distance between them. "I come here when I need to think," Lyra said, "when the demands of being a commander become too heavy." "It's beautiful," Jake said honestly. "My people value strength and victory," Lyra continued. "But sometimes I grow tired of always having to be strong, always having to win. Do you understand?" Jake thought about his own life, about always feeling like he had to prove himself, especially here in space where humans were seen as weak and inferior. "Yeah," he said. "I understand." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the water. "Dax was right about one thing," Lyra said finally. "I have refused many suitors, powerful warriors from important families. My own family is angry with me for remaining unbonded. They say I am too proud, too particular." "Why did you refuse them?" Jake asked. Lyra was quiet for a long moment. "Because they all wanted the same thing. They wanted to bond with Commander Lyra Vex, the decorated warrior, the daughter of a noble house. They wanted the status and the reputation. None of them cared about who I actually am." "And what about me?" Jake asked. "Why are you really going through with these trials?" Lyra looked at him. "Because when you complimented my braids, you were not trying to impress me or gain status. You simply saw something beautiful and said so. It was genuine. I have not experienced genuine in a very long time." Jake felt his face grow warm. "I am being genuine. But I'm also terrified. You know that, right? I'm terrified of these trials, terrified of failing, terrified of disappointing everyone." "I know," Lyra said. "But you do them anyway. That is courage. Real courage is not the absence of fear. It is continuing despite fear." They talked for another hour about their lives, their families, their worlds. Jake learned that Lyra had 3 younger brothers who all looked up to her. She learned that Jake had grown up in a small town on Earth and had always dreamed of going to space but never thought he was brave enough. When they finally walked back to the outpost, something had changed between them. They weren't quite friends, but they weren't strangers anymore either. That evening, Captain Williams called Jake to his office. "I've been hearing interesting reports about your trials," the captain said. "You're actually succeeding." "So far," Jake said. "But I don't know how long that will last." "There's something you need to know," the captain said, his expression serious. "Commander Dax Vorn has filed a formal complaint with the Krithari High Council. He's claiming that your courtship with Commander Vex is a mockery of Krithari traditions and should be invalidated." "Can he do that?" Jake asked. "Apparently yes," the captain said. "The council is sending representatives to observe the remaining trials. If they agree with Dax, they can end the courtship and potentially demand compensation for the insult to Krithari honor." "What kind of compensation?" Jake asked nervously. "The kind that might involve a Krithari prison," the captain said grimly. "This has become more serious than we thought, Lieutenant. If you want to withdraw, now would be the time." Jake thought about what Lyra had said in the clearing, about being tired of always having to prove herself, about wanting something genuine. If he withdrew now, she would be humiliated. Dax would win, and Lyra would be forced to choose some other warrior just to save face. "No," Jake said firmly. "I'm not withdrawing. If the council wants to observe, let them observe. I'll complete the trials properly." The captain studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right. But be careful, Lieutenant. This is about more than just you and Commander Vex now. This is about how the galaxy sees humanity." Jake left the captain's office with a heavy feeling in his chest. He had thought the trials were just about him and Lyra figuring out if they were compatible. He hadn't realized he was representing all of humanity. When he got back to his quarters, he found a message waiting for him. It was from Lyra. The message was short. "The next trial is in 5 days. It will be the hardest yet, but I believe you can succeed. Rest well, Jake Morrison." Jake read the message 3 times. She believed in him. A decorated Krithari warrior believed The 3rd trial was different from the first 2. When Jake arrived at the designated location, he found himself facing a massive underground cave system. Lyra stood at the entrance, along with 3 members of the Krithari High Council. They'd wore elaborate robes marked with symbols Jake didn't recognize. "This is the trial of trust," Lyra announced formally. "We will enter the caves together. Inside, we must work as a team to overcome the challenges and escape before nightfall. If we fail to emerge by sunset, we both fail the trial." One of the council members, an elderly female with silver hair similar to Lyra's battle braids, stepped forward. "This trial will show if you can truly function as bonded pairs. The caves are dangerous. They require both strength and intelligence to navigate. Many Krithari couples have failed this trial." Jake looked at the dark cave entrance and swallowed hard. "What kind of dangers?" "You will discover them as you go," the council member said. "That is part of the trial." Dax was there too, standing with his arms crossed and a smug expression on his face. "I completed this trial with my partner in only 3 hours," he said loudly. "Let us see how long it takes the weak human if he survives at all." Lyra ignored him. She turned to Jake and handed him a small light device. "Stay close to me. Trust my strength and I will trust your mind. Together we will succeed." They entered the caves. Almost immediately the temperature dropped and the darkness swallowed them. Jake's light device provided a small circle of illumination, but beyond that, everything was shadows. The first challenge came quickly. They reached a large chasm that split the cave in two. It was too wide for Jake to jump, though Lyra probably could make it. "There must be another way across," Jake said, looking around. He noticed that the cave walls on either side of the chasm were rough and had natural handholds. "What if you climb across on one side while I climb on the other? We can keep each other in sight." "The walls are not stable," Lyra said, pressing against one. Rocks crumbled under her hand. "If one of us falls, the other cannot help." Jake thought harder. Then he noticed a series of stalactites hanging from the ceiling above the chasm. "What if we use rope to connect us? You jump across, secure the rope, and I can use it to help me climb the wall. If I fall, the rope catches me." Lyra considered this, then nodded. That could work. She pulled a length of strong cord from her pack and tied it around both their waists. Then she backed up and ran at the chasm, leaping across with powerful legs. She landed easily and secured her end of the rope around a rock formation. Jake approached the wall and started climbing. It was slow going and the rocks did crumble under his hands and feet, but with the rope as backup, he made it across safely. They continued deeper into the caves. The next challenge was a room filled with a strange gas that made Jake's eyes water. Lyra seemed less affected, but even she was coughing. "We need to get through quickly," Lyra said. Jake noticed that the gas was heavier than air, settling toward the floor. "What if we climb along the walls near the ceiling where the air is clearer?" They did, and it worked. By staying high, they avoided the worst of the gas and made it through. The challenges kept coming. They encountered a pool of water that had to be crossed, a maze of tunnels that required careful mapping to avoid getting lost, and a chamber with a complex puzzle that required both of them to solve. As they worked together, Jake noticed something. Lyra never made him feel weak or useless. When his strength wasn't enough, she provided it without complaint. And when her approach didn't work, she listened to his ideas without dismissing them. They were a good team. Hours passed. Jake had lost track of time in the darkness of the caves. They had to be getting close to nightfall. He was exhausted, his clothes were torn, and he had scrapes and bruises all over. Finally, they reached what looked like the final chamber. A massive stone door blocked the way out. Strange symbols covered its surface. "It's a puzzle," Jake said, examining the symbols. "These aren't random. They're a pattern." Lyra looked at the door, then at the walls. "There are matching symbols. Here," she said, pointing to marks carved into the stone walls around them. They worked together, comparing the symbols on the door to those on the walls. Jake noticed that some symbols appeared multiple times while others appeared only once. He started arranging them in his mind, looking for logic. "It's about balance," he said suddenly. "See how these symbols are always paired? And these ones form a circle? It's showing us the order." With Lyra's help, they pressed the symbols in the correct sequence. The door rumbled and began to slide open. Light from outside poured in, nearly blinding them. They stumbled out of the caves just as the sun was touching the horizon. They had made it with minutes to spare. The council members were waiting, along with Dax and a crowd of other onlookers. Jake and Lyra stood there, covered in dust and dirt, breathing hard but victorious. The elderly council member approached them. "You have completed the trial of trust. This is no small achievement. Many pairs fail this test." Dax stepped forward, his face twisted with anger. "This proves nothing. The human got lucky again. These trials are supposed to test worthiness, but all they test is his ability to hide behind Commander Vex's strength." "Commander Dax," the elderly council member said sharply, "you overstep." "No," Dax insisted. "I demand the revelation ceremony. Let the sacred crystals show the truth of their bond. If it is genuine, the crystals will confirm it. If it is false, if this is all just a game or political maneuvering, the crystals will expose them both as frauds." The crowd murmured with shock. Jake looked at Lyra, confused. "What's the revelation ceremony?" Lyra's face had gone pale. "It is an ancient ritual," she said quietly. "The crystals create a telepathic link between two people. They expose true feelings and intentions. If there is significant doubt or deception, the crystals shatter." Jake felt his stomach drop. Their courtship had started as a diplomatic accident. Even though his feelings had grown real, would the crystals see that? Would they see how this all began with a mistake? "The revelation ceremony has not been called for in over a century," another council member said. "It is reserved for the most serious disputes of honor." "This is a serious dispute," Dax said. "A human has claimed the right to bond with one of our finest warriors through trickery and luck. I demand proof that their feelings are genuine." The elderly council member looked at Lyra and Jake. "Commander Vex, Lieutenant Morrison, do you agree to the revelation ceremony?" Jake wanted to say no. He wanted to run away and forget this ever happened. But if he refused, it would dishonor Lyra. And worse, it would prove Dax right. "I agree," Jake said. "As do I," Lyra said, though her voice was tight with tension. "Then it is decided," the council member announced. "The revelation ceremony will take place in 3 days on the Crithari homeworld. All interested parties may witness. The truth will be revealed for all to see." After the crowd dispersed, Lyra pulled Jake aside. They walked back toward the clearing she had shown him before, the quiet place by the stream. "I am sorry," Lyra said as soon as they were alone. "I did not think Dax would go this far." "What happens during this ceremony?" Jake asked. Lyra sat heavily on the rock. "The crystals connect our minds. Everyone watching will be able to see our memories and feelings related to our courtship. They will see how it began, how it developed, everything. They'll see that it started with a mistake," Jake said. "They'll see that you only gave me the challenge because you expected me to refuse." "Yes," Lyra said quietly. "And they will see my shame at using you this way. My family has been pressuring me to choose a mate for years. When you made your innocent comment, I saw an opportunity. If I accepted a challenge from someone completely inappropriate, someone who would obviously fail, it would satisfy honor while giving me more time. I did not expect you to keep succeeding. I did not expect." She trailed off. "You didn't expect to actually like me," Jake finished. "No," Lyra admitted. "I did not. But I do. These past weeks, getting to know you, working with you, I have felt something I have never felt with any of my people. You do not want me for my reputation or my family name. You see me. The real me." Jake sat beside her. "I like you too. A lot, actually. Which is crazy because a month ago I didn't even know your species existed." They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of what was coming hanging over them. "What if the crystals show that our bond isn't real because of how it started?" Jake asked. "What happens then?" "Then we will both be shamed," Lyra said. "You will likely face charges of dishonoring a Crithari warrior. I will be forced to accept a mate chosen by my family to restore honor. And human Crithari relations will suffer because it will look like you deliberately mocked our customs." "That's a lot of bad outcomes," Jake said. "Yes," Lyra agreed. "What if we told the truth now?" Jake suggested. "What if we explained how it really happened before the ceremony? We could end the courtship mutually and avoid the whole thing." Lyra shook her head. Dax has already made the challenge formal. To withdraw now would be the same as admitting guilt. The ceremony is the only way forward. Jake took a deep breath. Then we face it together. We tell the truth through the crystals. Yes, it started as an accident and a misunderstanding. But what we have now is real. Maybe that will be enough. Lyra looked at him with her striking silver eyes. You would. The Crithari homeworld was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The capital city was built into the side of a massive mountain range, with buildings carved from stone and metal that gleamed in the light of 3 moons. Everything was built on a grand scale that made Jake feel even smaller than usual. The revelation ceremony was to take place in the Grand Hall, an ancient structure at the heart of the city. As Jake and Lyra approached, Jake could see thousands of Crithari gathered outside. News of the ceremony had spread across the planet. This wasn't just about them anymore. It was about whether humans deserved respect in Crithari society. Captain Williams walked beside Jake, along with Amy and several other human officers. Whatever happens in there, you represented humanity well, the captain said quietly. No one could have done better. Inside the Grand Hall, Jake felt his breath catch. The room was massive, with a ceiling that seemed impossibly high. Rows of seats surrounded a central platform where 2 crystalline structures stood, each about 6 feet tall and glowing with a soft blue light. These were the sacred crystals. The High Council sat in places of honor at the front. Lyra's family was there too, her mother and father wearing formal robes covered in military honors. Her 3 younger brothers watched with worried expressions. Dax stood off to one side, his arms crossed and his face smug. He clearly expected to be proven right. Are you ready? Lyra asked Jake quietly. No, Jake admitted, but let's do it anyway. They walked to the platform together. The elderly council member who had observed their trials stood and addressed the crowd. We are here to witness the revelation ceremony, she announced, her voice carrying through the hall. Lieutenant Jake Morrison of Earth and Commander Lyra Vex of Krathar will submit themselves to the sacred crystals. The crystals will show the truth of their bond, their intentions, and their hearts. No deception can hide from the crystals. What is shown will be seen by all present. She gestured to the crystals. Approach and place your hands upon the crystals. Let the revelation begin. Jake and Lyra stepped forward. Jake placed his hands on the smooth surface of one crystal, while Lyra did the same with the other. The moment they made contact, Jake felt a strange tingling sensation rush through his body. Then the world dissolved. Images began appearing in the air above the platform, visible to everyone in the hall. They were Jake's memories, pulled from his mind by the crystals. The crowd saw Jake at the diplomatic reception, nervous and out of place. They saw him notice Lyra's braids and genuinely think they were beautiful. They saw him approach without any knowledge of what his words would mean. They heard him say, "That's really nice hair," with complete innocence. Then Lyra's memories appeared alongside his. The crowd saw her shock when Jake spoke. They saw her quick thinking as she decided to issue a challenge, expecting him to refuse. They saw her reasons, which were exactly what she had admitted to Jake. She wanted more time, wanted to avoid the suitors her family kept pushing on her, wanted one moment of control in a life that felt increasingly trapped. Some in the crowd gasped. Others murmured angrily. This was not the romantic beginning everyone had imagined, but the memories continued. The crowd watched Jake struggle through the trial of endurance, falling and getting back up over and over. They saw Lyra watching him with growing respect. They watched the trial of strategy and saw Jake's creative thinking in combat. They saw Dax's angry challenge and Lyra's fierce defense of Jake. They watched the conversation by the stream where Jake and Lyra first really talked to each other. They felt the emotions attached to these memories through the telepathic link. Lyra's surprise at actually enjoying Jake's company. Jake's growing admiration for Lyra's strength and hidden vulnerability. The memories of the trial of trust played out, showing Jake and Lyra working together perfectly, trusting each other completely. The crowd could feel the bond that had formed between them during those hours in the caves. Then came the recent memories. The decision to face the revelation ceremony together. The conversation where they admitted their feelings were real, even if the beginning had been a mistake. The crystals showed everything. They showed Jake's fear and determination. They showed Lyra's conflict between duty and desire. They showed two people from completely different worlds who had found something genuine in the most unlikely circumstances. Finally, the crystals showed the present moment. Jake and Lyra standing before the crowd, hands on the crystals fully exposed and vulnerable. The emotions were clear and undeniable. Respect, trust, affection. Real feelings that had grown from an absurd beginning into something meaningful. The crystals stopped glowing. The visions faded. Jake and Lyra stood on the platform, breathing hard from the intensity of the experience. The crowd was completely silent. The elderly council member stood. "The crystals have shown the truth," she announced. "The beginning of this courtship was built on misunderstanding and miscalculation. But what has grown from that beginning is genuine. The bond between Lieutenant Morrison and Commander Vex is real." Dax pushed forward from the crowd. "This is unacceptable." "Their bond began with deception. That invalidates everything that came after, does it?" the council member asked. "Tell me, Commander Dax, how many Crithari courtships begin with political arrangements or family pressure? How many of our people bond for status or advantage rather than genuine connection? These two began with a mistake but found truth. Is that not more honorable than beginning with lies and finding nothing?" Dax had no answer to that. "I challenge the right of this human to stand before us," Dax said instead, his voice rising. "He is weak. He uses tricks instead of true strength. I challenge him to prove his worth in combat. Let him face me, a true Crithari warrior, and we will see if he deserves Commander Vex." The crowd erupted in shouts, some supporting Dax and others opposing him. The council member raised her hand for silence. "This is your right under ancient law," she said to Dax. "Lieutenant Morrison, do you accept this challenge?" Every part of Jake's body was screaming no. Dax was bigger, stronger, and trained since childhood in combat. Jake would lose badly, but if he refused, everything they had just revealed would be meaningless. "I accept," Jake said. His voice only shook a little. "However," the council member continued, "the challenged party may set the terms of combat." "Lieutenant Morrison, you may choose the rules of engagement," Jake thought fast. He couldn't beat Dax in a straight fight. But maybe he didn't have to. "Human rules," Jake said. "The fight continues until one of us surrenders or is unable to continue. Any technique is allowed. The goal is not to prove who is strongest, but who is most determined." Dax laughed. "Agreed. This will be over quickly." The crowd moved back, creating a large circle in the center of the hall. Dax stepped into the circle, removing his formal robes to reveal his muscular form. He was even more intimidating than Lyra, and he looked at Jake like a predator eyeing prey. Jake stepped into the circle. He had no real plan except to survive as long as possible. "Begin," the council member announced. Dax rushed forward immediately, obviously intending to end this with one powerful strike. Jake dove to the side at the last second, rolling across the stone floor. He came up and backed away quickly. Dax laughed. "Running already, human?" Jake didn't answer. He kept moving, staying out of Dax's reach, making the larger warrior chase him around the circle. It looked cowardly, and Jake could hear some in the crowd jeering at him. But he was buying time, studying how Dax moved, looking for any weakness. Dax was fast and powerful, but he was also getting frustrated. Warriors like him expected direct confrontation. Jake's evasion was outside his experience. When Dax charged again, Jake waited until the last possible second, then dropped flat to the ground. Dax's momentum carried him forward, and he tripped over Jake's prone form, crashing to the floor with a loud thud. The crowd gasped. Some laughed. Dax got up, his face red with anger and embarrassment. "You fight like an insect," Dax snarled. "No honor, no courage." "I fight like someone who wants to win," Jake replied. Dax came at him more carefully this time. When he swung, Jake blocked with his arm and used the larger warrior's force to spin himself away. He landed a few quick strikes to Dax's ribs, which didn't hurt the warrior, but showed he could make contact. The fight continued. Jake couldn't hurt Dax significantly, but he could frustrate him. Every time Dax tried to grab him, Jake slipped away. Every time Dax threw a powerful strike, Jake turned it aside or dodged. He used everything he had learned in the trials, every trick, every bit of strategy. Minutes passed, then tens of minutes. Dax was breathing hard now, his strikes becoming wilder and less controlled. Jake was exhausted, covered in bruises from the hits he hadn't managed to avoid completely, but he was still on his feet. "Surrender," Dax demanded. "You cannot win." "Neither can you," Jake replied. You can't catch me and I won't stop. We can do this all day. Dax roared in frustration and charged one more time. But he was tired now and his judgment was off. Jake sidestepped, stuck out his leg, and pushed. Dax went down hard, and this time he stayed down, gasping for breath. Jake stood over him, swaying with exhaustion. Do you yield? Dax glared up at him with pure hatred. But he was too tired to continue. I yield, he spat. The hall erupted in noise. Some Krithari were cheering, others were arguing. Everyone had an